In this video, we're going to demonstrate how to create a stored procedure that has input and output variables. Okay, in this case, we're going to use two input variables. The create procedure, get person address by type, is the name of the procedure. We create three variables: at person ID, integer; at address type, integer; and then at address, which is a type of variable character of length 200. And you notice there's an output keyword right after that. The output keyword indicates that there will be value in their return once the stored procedure is executed. A stored procedure can have from 0 to many output parameters, but it cannot have a return type like we saw in a function. Okay, so if we need to get information out of a stored procedure, this is how we do it. Okay, and so we create stored procedure, and there's an as keyword just below that line, and that's how the syntax we use. And notice that there's the actual code starts with begin and ends with end. That designates a block of code in a stored procedure, and it can have more than one of those, which we may see later on in the course. So let's look at the select statement. Okay, select, what I did here is I want to return the person's address, city, and state from the database, but I don't want to put it all in, and I don't want to put it in three different output variables. I just want to concatenate it all into one. And so what I did, as I said, I took the name of the output variable, which is at address. I said set that equal to, set that equal to address line 1 plus, and I put a little space there, okay, a couple of single quotes with a space in the middle, plus city, plus state from person address. So those are the three columns we're pulling back. Where person ID is equal to the value input in the person ID field. And the address type is equal to the address type that was put into that field. And those address types, there's a lookup table called lookup address types in the database. If you wanted to look in there, you can see what the possible address types are. There are 8 possibles. All right, so this is how we would execute this. Well, let's create the stored procedure first. All right, so I will execute. See, command completed successfully. I can go over and make sure it actually created. But the thing you'll notice is under stored procedures, I don't see it. It's because it doesn't auto refresh. So I'm going to refresh it. I'm sorry, I just refresh system stored procedures, not stored procedures in general. And there we go. Get person address by type. Right. So now let's execute it. Well, what do we have to do? It's a little bit different how we execute this because it has a return type. All right. So first thing I have to do is, since I have a return variable, I have to create a, see if I can make this a little bigger. Okay, I have to create a variable to hold each of the return types. In this case, we have a return address created as the same length as is expecting to be returned, so I don't have an overflow. And then I just set it equal to blank initially. So I'm executing the stored procedure using the execute keyword. You notice the stored procedure says can't find it. It's there. When you create a stored procedure initially, sometimes it doesn't see it even though it's there. For whatever reason, the table behind the scenes doesn't refresh. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm passing in a person ID. I already chose a person ID, in this case 186, that I know has an address in there. And I chose an address type of 8. And I don't even remember what that is, what the address type of 8 was. In fact, I could look it up, but it's really not important. And then finally, I have to deal with that return type that we had. Okay, so everything you notice it has to be in the same order that it was in the create statement. Okay, so same here: person ID, address type, and finally return address. Well, it's going to return that value from the stored procedure. Okay, so and it's going to put it into my variable called return address. In order to see what's in there, I actually have to afterwards say select at return address. Okay, so here we go. I ran it, and sure enough, person 186 has a value in there, and it's postbox 45 Underhill, Vermont. One little thing that you want to be careful about here is if you're testing your stored procedure and you try to execute it, and you don't put that output keyword, watch what happens. You get a blank. That is because I have a blank in return address. It doesn't know It's not smart enough to say, hey, this is a variable that we need to stuff this information into. So we have to put output. And then we run it again, and then it's back. Okay, so that in a nutshell is how to create a stored procedure and execute it that has input and output variables.